Welcome to our final week of our series, My Tribe. For the past few weeks, we've been talking about the people that we surround ourselves with. The first week, we talked about who is in front of us. Who is it that is mentoring, coaching, and challenging us in our walk with God? Last week, we talked about who is beside us. Who is it that is helping us in our journey? Who is lifting us up? And who is it that we ourselves are walking beside and helping them in their walk with God? And this week, we're going to wrap up with who is behind you. What do I mean by this? What I mean is, who is it that you are investing and pouring into? Not only are we called to live out the mission that God has given us, but we are also called to teach others how to live out the mission that God has called them to. Let's take a look at some of Jesus' final words to his disciples. Jesus came and told his disciples, "I have been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you. And be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age." Can I nerd out for just a minute? No? Well, I'm going to anyway. Star Wars. Spaceships, blasters, lightsabers, scruffy-looking nerf herders. But on top of this, Star Wars also had the Jedi. Now, the Jedi mission was, when you became a master, you would take on a Padawan, an apprentice. And that master's goal was to train up that Padawan to eventually become a master themselves. And then they would take on Padawans. And so you had this endless cycle of master take on a Padawan, training to a master to take on a Padawan. An endless cycle of the age of the Jedi. Fun fact, this concept of a master training a Padawan was not originally George Lucas's idea. It's actually been a concept that Jesus has been teaching us all along. Jesus wants us to have Padawans. So, who are you pouring into? When I look back on my life, I think of a time when I was right out of high school and a church offered me an internship. And this internship was working with junior high and high school students. And during that summer, I developed a friendship with one of the students who was going from junior high into high school. And I spent the summer having conversations with him, kind of giving him what little wisdom and advice that a fresh out of high school student could have. And I just poured into him what God had given me. And now, after all of these years, I still have a friendship with Tyler Roland, and you know him better as your youth pastor. So again, who is it that you are pouring into? Because you never know the end result of that relationship. Go ahead and take some time to answer the questions that are on your screen and discuss this with your small group.
This image of mentorship or Padawaning is present all over the Bible. We see Elijah and Elisha. We see Naomi and Ruth, Eli, Samuel, even Jesus and his disciples. There is mentorship everywhere within the Bible. One of my favorite mentorship pairs is Paul and Timothy. You might remember Paul from when we talked about him in the first week of this series. After Ananias and Barnabas had poured into Paul, he began doing his own ministry of being a missionary to the surrounding regions around him. And as he was developing in his faith, he decided that he needed to turn around and to mentor someone else. Enter Timothy. Timothy was someone that Paul intentionally spent time pouring into. We're going to look at this relationship and see what the Bible has to say about mentorship. Now, before we dive into this story, I want to give you a little bit of context. Timothy was only 16 years old, and Paul was just starting out on his missionary journeys. Paul invited Timothy to learn from him and to be a part of what he was doing. Check this out. Paul went first to Derbe and then to Lystra, where there was a young disciple named Timothy. His mother was a Jewish believer, but his father was Greek. Timothy was well thought of by the believers in Lystra and Iconium, so Paul wanted him to join them on their journey. In deference to the Jews of the area, he arranged for Timothy to be circumcised before they left, for everyone knew that his father was Greek. Then they went from town to town, instructing the believers to follow the decisions made by the apostles and elders in Jerusalem. So the churches were strengthened in their faith and grew larger every day. Here we see an excellent example of Paul finding someone that could be behind him as he was following Jesus. Paul knew that he was called to make disciples, and so he decided to ask Timothy to be a part of that journey, to be someone that Paul could mentor. And there's a couple things that I really love about this that I want to point out to you. First, I really love the fact that Paul was looking for someone to invest in. It says that when he got to the city, he found Timothy, who was a believer, and Paul decided that he wanted to invest in Timothy. The second thing was that Timothy's background didn't matter. If you noticed in the verses, it spends a lot of time talking about Timothy's heritage, that his mother was Jewish and his father was Greek. This was a really, really big deal at the time, and it said that Timothy was not raised in a Jewish household like many people at that time were, or many people who you would expect to be following Jesus were. Timothy did not have a typical heritage of someone who followed Jesus at that time, but to Paul, that didn't matter. Paul invited Timothy to join into this journey of following Jesus. Third, Timothy was well thought of by everyone. He had a good reputation and he had good potential. He had great rapport with the people in the city that Paul came in contact with. Fourth, Paul invited Timothy into what Paul was already doing. When you think about the idea of mentoring someone, it can be a daunting idea that you need to step into something big and new and scary, but that's not what Paul did. Paul was already heading on his missionary journey, and he invited Timothy to come along with him. Being a mentor to someone doesn't necessarily mean you have to start something new. Just invite people on your journey of seeking Jesus. Finally, the passage says that this relationship helped churches grow. Mentorship is good for the two people involved, but even more than that, Christian mentorship helps us live out the mission that we have been given by Jesus. Now, those are all really wonderful things, but I think the coolest thing about this whole passage is the fact that this was not a short-term relationship. We see Paul and Timothy growing in their faith together over a span of so many years. They actually met when Timothy was 16 years old, and then we see Paul writing Timothy letters 14 years later, still pouring into him and giving him advice when Timothy was a 30-year-old man. This partnership, this mentorship lasted so long as both of these men were pursuing Jesus. I love this. You can see this relationship in 2 Timothy. Let's read it together. Timothy, my dear son, be strong through the grace that God gives you in Christ Jesus. You have heard me teach things that have been confirmed by many reliable witnesses. Now I teach these truths to other trustworthy people who will be able to pass them on to others. I point this out because you see that Paul is leaving a legacy of people behind him who are learning about Jesus, and those people can teach more people about Jesus. The mission we are called to requires that we not try to do it alone, but as we grow in our faith, we build up our tribe with people behind us that we are teaching as we learn and grow. We need each other. Take a second, talk about some of these questions on the screen.
So who are the people behind you? Who are the people that God has put on your heart to begin to invest in? The people that you are giving the mission of Jesus Christ, just like people before you gave you the mission of Jesus, and the people before them and the people before them. Who are those people that you are investing in? The people behind you. And how do we know those are the people that we should be inviting into our tribe? I want to give you a couple points here that I think might be helpful in identifying these people. Number one, do they want to be mentored? Okay, it's kidnapping if they don't want to and you just force them to do those kind of things. That's generally frowned upon by society. So do they want to be mentored? Do the people actually want you to invest into their life? Secondly, do they have the same mission? Are they on mission living for Jesus? Do they have a relationship with Jesus? Do they want to have a relationship with Jesus? We can't invest into people and give them the mission that God has given us if they have no interest in that mission. Third, are they trustworthy? If we're going to trust our life to them, we're going to give them information about our life and open up and be vulnerable with them, are they trustworthy to be able to handle that? Fourth, I want to encourage you to invite them into what you're already doing. Kellie hit it out of the park when she said that we need to just invite people into whatever we're already doing. It doesn't have to be this huge, daunting task, but it could just simply be, what is God doing in your life? Are you inviting people into what you're already doing? And lastly, I want to challenge you to commit for the long haul. Mentorship, discipleship, having people in your life in front, beside, behind, whatever you want to call it, it is not a short-term thing. It's about investing your life into other people's lives so that God's mission may be accomplished, that God may be glorified. Take a few minutes in your small group to discuss the questions on the screen. So who's your tribe? Who are the people in front of you? Who are the people beside you or that you're standing beside? And who are the people behind you? People that are helping you accomplish the mission that God has for you in your life. Because we're not meant to do this alone. We're not meant to do this mission that God has called us to alone. We need each other. We are better together. So as you live out the mission that God has called us to, who are the people that are for you? Who are the people that make you better? Who are the people that know you and love you? Those are the people I want to surround myself with. That's my tribe.